Welcome to the Aaron Harber Show and our special series with former FBI Director Robert S. Mueller. This is part 3 of the 4-part series, so make certain you watch all 4 of the shows. All right, one of the things I'd like you to talk about, a little insight on you personally, and I hope you can share the story with us a little bit, because of your concern about constitutional rights and citizen rights. Tell us a little bit, if you will, about the time when you and Jim Comey had concerns about what the White House wanted you to do, and this is, of course, when the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, I think, was actually in the hospital.
Yeah, he was ill. There came a circumstance where, in terms of reauthorize, it was time to reauthorize an interception that had been approved and ordered by the president, and in every previous application it had been determined that it was legal to proceed. In this particular application, the Justice Department believed that it was not appropriate to proceed because of some legal issues, and the case was pressed by the White House, and basically Jim Comey and myself said we just would not be able to continue to serve if this wasn't straightened out, and ultimately the order was changed to pass the scrutiny by the Department of Justice.
So, I mean, you actually were, in essence, saying you and Jim Comey was the Deputy Attorney General at the time, but he was actually the acting Attorney General.
He was that too.
Because of the Attorney General being hospitalized. And I mean, you felt so strongly about this that you essentially were saying, we're going to resign if you proceed in this manner.
Yes.
I mean, I just think that's really extraordinary. Bob doesn't want me to talk about him like that, but I mean, I think that's just such a great model for people and
well, you really don't think about it as you go through it. You just try to do the right thing at the right time. That's
well, that's I wish more of us did that, I guess. One of the big issues, Bob, is certainly with law enforcement and community relations, and some of the issues in relation to how citizens and especially young people today view law enforcement. What are your thoughts about how do we improve communication? How do we improve community relations between law enforcement agencies, whether it be federal, state, local, and citizens, and especially young people? What are your thoughts on that? That's a pretty wide question. So.
Well, being an FBI agent, being a police officer in Denver or Aurora or any community is a tremendously rewarding job. To a certain extent, it goes up and down. It can be thankless as well. But you are really serving your community if you're serving as a police officer. I prosecuted homicide cases in Washington, D.C. for almost 3 years, where I spent much, if not most of my time in the courtrooms along with homicide victims, families, and the like. And it tears apart a community, and there's no more valuable function to the safety and security of a community than the police forces. If you look at what happens overseas, where we end up in Iraq and Afghanistan and what have you, the military can do something, but it should be the internal police forces that are responsible for the safety and security of that community. So it's tremendously important. It's tremendously important that younger people think of this as an occupation. I am a great believer in task forces. If you have to sit down and share a Coke or a sandwich or what have you with somebody in a different force, more power to you. And to the extent that you can have something like what the Bureau has, we have what's called the FBI Citizens Academy, where we bring in citizens from the community and take them through a course that shows them exactly what we do. That is tremendously beneficial. But community policing, having the persons that are policing being integral to the community is the way out of the problems you have. The last point I'd make is training. The problem with training is always the last thing on your budget list. It's the first thing to get cut, and it should not be. And it should not be if you're doing street-to-street activity to suppress crime.
What, you know, we lose 30,000 or more people a year to gun violence. 33,000 people a year die through the use of guns. 2/3 of that is from suicides. And our numbers are just extraordinary compared to other countries on a numerical basis, on a per capita basis. I mean, you have to have given this some thought. What is going on in our country where we're killing each other and ourselves at those kind of rates?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the violent crime rate in the United States has gone down rather dramatically over the last 5 to 10 years, until this year, where it is rising rather dramatically in several of our cities. And if you ask the sociologists, you ask those who look at this, what are the causes of the reduction of crime? There is no one cause, and it seems to be unique to a particular city that they've had a reduction in crime, although it seems to have occurred over a period of time. Community policing is part of it. The fact of the matter is, in the United States, the Second Amendment, you have the right to carry arms, bear arms, and that is not a right that you have in other countries. There are other countries that are even worse than we are. In Latin America, some of the countries that where there's a turnstile in terms of gang members, El Salvador, other places where gangs are running rampant and guns are prevalent. So we've got some company out there, but boy, do we have a long ways to go.
All right, speaking of gangs, in terms of industrialized countries, certainly we've got such a variety of challenges with gangs, both gangs locally, as it were, others who've gone from city to city, some who have actually infiltrated from other countries. Mexico, you and I have talked about before. What's the special challenge, and how do we address that?
Each country has their own special challenge. I mean, we have the West Coast gangs, we have East Coast gangs, we have the Midwest gangs, basically. They've grown up in different venues for 30, 40, 50 years. And it's very, very difficult to stop, and you will have episodic victories, but long term, you're not going to eradicate gangs. In any particular communities, you can successfully address it. But we're not the only country in this regard either. In Europe, Eastern European gangs. And also motorcycle gangs. You've got motorcycle gangs in the West Coast, the South. You've got motorcycle gangs in Scandinavia, for instance. And so gang activity is not necessarily unique to us.
All right, I'm going to jump to the international. I want to talk a little bit about cyber issues, cybercrime, terrorism. Daesh, or ISIL, seems to have had extraordinary success cyber recruiting. Am I wrong about that, or what's your sense of what they've accomplished, what they're doing? And I also want to know why are they allowed? I mean, why do they have the opportunities to be in social media or on social media at all? Why can't we stop that?
Well, let me address the last one. It's with the First Amendment, right to speech. It often is a very fine line as to which it is. I think depending on the particular companies, some are better than pulling down websites than others. And I know there is efforts underway to find ways to convince the companies that are responsible for a great deal of the social media to be more proactive in stopping it. But the fact of the matter is the internet is so ubiquitous, the ability to move from place to place to place, you can staunch it for a period of time, but anybody who wants to find that propaganda will find that propaganda. As to the first part of the question, we are in a new age when it comes to, I think, cyber terrorism. 21,000 or so foreign fighters have gone to Syria or northern Iraq, and many of them have skills that previous generations have not had. We've started to see the use of those skills. They took down Channel 5 in Paris, and also we had the instance where they posted the names of our military, 100+ military personnel with exhortations to others to go out and do damage to these persons and their families. That was undertaken by the cyber resources of ISIS. And with that numbers of persons coming in with those skills, we're going to see more of it.
There's more of the Aaron Harber Show after this.
China can gather pieces of information, but what you do not see is the capability of China to come up with an Apple or a Google or a substantial technological advance.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scene photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rex Howell Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today.
Join me and watch The Aaron Harber Show.
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 I'm Reverend Jesse Jackson. Watch The Aaron Harber Show and keep hope alive.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
There seems to have been so many breaches of security, including in the private sector. I mean, the Anthem case, 80 million records with people's names, social security numbers, birth dates, medical histories, the Office of Personnel Management and the federal government, that breach where you had interview information, fingerprints. Why are we even seeing that? And you would think that companies and federal agencies would be encrypting data, protecting data. Why isn't that happening?
Well, if you look at the Europeans have always used chips with their cards. We've used the band, the stripe, which is far less secure. Now companies are finally catching up with that to the extent that the economics are such that it drives the activity of our corporations. If you have not gotten them, you probably will get a card with a chip very soon. I always ask audiences, how many of you shopped at Target between Thanksgiving and Christmas 3 years ago? Yeah, including myself. I got my hands up there. And I say that because of all the people who were affected here in this room. Yes, you got a new credit card, but then you had to go online to the 15 or 20 various places where you got that credit card to change it. And the American people aren't going to put up for that for very long. And indeed, they are not, and so you have the change. Now, the other aspect...
By the way, I shopped there one time, and...
That's okay, so did I. Doesn't make any difference, I got the same letter. But one other sea change is what we saw with the Sony hack. For two reasons. One, there was a wiper virus utilized which wiped out half the servers and the hard drives, which makes it very difficult to identify who's responsible. But in this case, as the administration came out and said, it was North Korea. And so it was the first time where you have a foreign entity country that has attacked a U.S. corporation, which expands the dialogue to the responsibility of the federal government to protect against this or be active against it itself, as opposed to limiting the dialogue to just the criminal justice arena. Now it's a national security matter. And as it becomes a national security matter, on the table are far more options than you had before.
What are some of those options?
Well, I can speak generally to say enhanced defenses and with appropriate authorities and approvals advanced aggressive response.
Are we under, whether it be corporately or the government, especially the federal government, are we under constant cyber attack by China?
Yes.
And what can we do about it?
Well, I mean, we arrested 6, no, it was 5. We didn't arrest. We indicted 5 individuals from China up in Pennsylvania a year or 2 ago. There are activities are undertaken by the government to both identify and address both the FBI, CIA, NSA, the substantial efforts of China to get our intellectual property, and whether it be in the military side or the corporate side, and utilize those thefts to skip ahead in terms of developing the types of things that we develop here in the United States. I tend to think, though, that China can gather pieces of information, but what you do not see is the capability of China to come up with an Apple or a Google or a substantial technological advance, whether it be with jets or with items on the internet, because they don't have the support of the financiers, for one, and secondly, the ingenuity that we display in the United States in coming up with a fix when we need a fix driven by the economics. And so while we undertake or undergo terrorist attacks in the cyber realm, I am optimistic about our ability as a country ultimately, when we get our act together, to address it.
Is there a solution to advance technologically simply to get our secrets?
Is there a, I'm sorry, the question?
Is there a solution in China in terms of to address that?
In substantial part, yes. And also to enter into joint ventures and the like, where they may have access to the technology and import it into China, and China would be ahead on that.
Let's talk about individuals and the cyber world. I mean, there's a lot of discussion about cyberbullying today in terms of, and also how young people use social media, the internet. Give me your thoughts, and maybe, not necessarily as the FBI director, but what are some themes or practices that are worth looking at?
Well, cyberbullying, I know, is being handled generally on the state side with state legislation. I look at it, frankly, as a father with children, with their ability to use Facebook and the like, knowing that anything you put on Facebook is going to be there and be there and be there and be there, and not just Facebook, just about any site. And who at that age understands the consequences of doing something when you're 16 that may come back to haunt you when you're 25 and you're seeking a job in not the private sector necessarily, but in the public sector that you really want, but some of the things that you said or done or taken way back when preclude you from exploring those options.
With, I mean, and when you're talking about that, the concept that even if once you post something, even if you take it down, that doesn't mean it's gone.
It's true.
And certainly a lot of people don't appreciate that and find out the hard way.
There's more of the Aaron Harber Show after this.
Critical partners in addressing cyber is the private sector. It plays a role of state and local law enforcement in some sense because the private sector has the evidence, you are the victims, and to the extent that we can break down the walls between the private sector and the federal sector, we will be successful.
For information on how to help promote civil and mutually respectful discourse and support expansion of the distribution of our programs, please email info@harbertv.com.
I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. You can follow the show on Twitter for instant notification of new episodes, live event invitations, outtakes, and behind-the-scene photos. And tweet us your topic and guest suggestions today. Hi, I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Because I've never done endorsements or commercials, people ask how are our programs funded, especially because we provide them as a public service to all our broadcast outlets. It's expensive to produce our show, whether we do them here in Denver or go to places such as Aspen, Washington, D.C., or even Iraq. The answer is we depend on contributions to support our work to bring you some of the nation's top opinion leaders. Individuals, businesses, foundations, and other nonprofits make tax-deductible contributions to the Democracy and Media Education Foundation to help allow us to continue to work for you. To find out more, to make a donation, just go to dmefd.org. The DMEF is a tax-exempt public charitable organization and has promised to dedicate 100% of every contribution to support our public affairs initiatives. If you believe, as I do, in the need for a forum which promotes civil discourse and mutually respectful discussion, I hope you'll decide to make a contribution today. I'm Aaron Harber, host of The Aaron Harber Show. Find us on Facebook to get all the latest updates, see behind-the-scenes photos, and make comments and ask me questions. You can see episodes before their TV broadcast, so like the show today.
The Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award recognizes an individual who, through leadership, skill, and dedication, is advancing the broadcast industry in our state and our nation. Tonight, we honor Aaron Harber. Aaron has worked extensively in the media as a host, producer, political and economic commentator, and columnist. Today, the Aaron Harber Show is the focus of his media involvement. Aaron, it is a privilege to present you with the Rexall Broadcaster of the Year Award. Congratulations.
Just make journalism great again.
The Aaron Harber Show may be viewed 24/7 at no charge from any location in the world at harbertv.com.
This segment features questions from the audience for former FBI Director Robert Mueller. The audience of over 500 attendees not only included FBI agents, Homeland Security officials, as well as other law enforcement officials, but also had over 200 high school students from a number of different school districts.
My name is Shifu Shong. I'm from Meade High School. So the question I wanted to ask you was, about a week ago, I remember I was on Facebook and there's this video saying that the Flashlight app, which most of us have downloaded either from the Apple Store or from Google Play, has our personal data tapped. And so there's like a Trojan virus or something that's been installed from the app into our phone that has now our personal data. And so on the video it explained that China is one of them that now has our information. And so I was just wondering if you, Mr. Director, have any idea about that and know if the FBI can do anything to further prevent that from happening.
Well, I can tell you that the director was late today because he was downloading a number of different apps. He's a huge Angry Birds fan for many years, and I'm sure he can talk about that very directly, but I'll comment on it.
What happened to you? You were, talking in reality a few moments ago. On the apps, all of us are going to be, I tell corporations, give a fair amount of advice to corporations, say you either have been hacked or you will be hacked. Nobody is going to escape. Now, being the head of the organization, I am a target. I'm a target of Anonymous, LulzSec, you name the groups out there. And I periodically get calls from the bank saying, did you really authorize this money going to this country overseas? To which the answer is no. And it is, it's happened more than once. In any event, that's the life we live in now. And there are companies that are better at patrolling their apps and companies that are not. And I think the ones that are and those were not. But finding your way in this jungle is only going to get more difficult down the road, but it is the life we live in.
And what about the fact that I think a lot of people don't realize when they download an app that almost no one reads user agreements. Now, a lot of agreements for apps say you are giving them permission, for example, if you log on via Facebook, where they can download all your Facebook friends, where they can take all if you use Outlook or another database for email, they can download all of those email addresses. I think a lot of people don't even realize that they are giving permission for a company to have access to that information. Should there be, to protect consumers, should there be federal legislation which prohibits that, that says you cannot access people's personal information like that?
You see, I don't know to what extent, I mean, if you are using a mapping app, for instance, whether if you pass such a statute, there would be a backlash because you're not getting the same quality of service that you had before. And I just don't know that particular balance.
All right.
I will tell you one point I should have made in terms of partnerships in the cyber arena. It's not necessarily state and local law enforcement. At the federal level, it's NSA, FBI, and Department of Homeland Security generally have the responsibilities for investigating domestically, the FBI, preparing the infrastructure, DHS, and then NSA overseas. But the critical partners in addressing cyber is the private sector. It plays a role in state and local law enforcement in some sense because the private sector has the evidence, you are the victims, and to the extent that we can break down the walls between the private sector and the federal sector, we'll be successful. There have been a number of statutes that have been sitting up on the Hill that would give corporations a safe harbor if they provided information to the federal government on hacks. And that needs to be passed. Until we can exchange information on hacking indicia between the federal sector and the private sector, we're not going to be making the headway we should.
You know, one of the issues in regard to that is certainly consumers, citizens have been a number very upset and have expressed their displeasure to private companies with how some private companies have given in the past, have given government agencies access to their data. There's been, I think, a movement on part of a number of high-tech companies to now encrypt that data so that it's very difficult for government agencies to access that information. What's the balance that should be struck there in that? You know, people don't want the government intruding into their private lives. At the same time, the government certainly wants access to certain information. What balance could you strike to make that work?
Well, I think it's going to be a piecemeal balance at this juncture. I started to say in response to a previous question, you have encryption that is substantial in this day and age, and encryption apps are a dime a dozen out there, so anybody now can encrypt. The encryption of a device by certain of the companies, whereby the only password, if I go and I'm doing an investigation into, I don't know, organized crime, or I'll just say organized crime, and I get a warrant from a judge saying that you can intercept the conversations of this particular individual, I go to the company and say, okay, I want the information off the cell phone. The cell phone doesn't keep the password. The password goes with the individual on the phone. And that has evolved over the last year and a half, 2 years, and is going to be predominate. And from the perspective of law enforcement, you are going to have persons whose lives are lost because you cannot have access to that information. You take my Boston Marathon bombing case. If there is information on that as to whom he had talked to recently about the next potential bombing, that's lost to you. That device is there like it's no better than a brick. And that's the problem that one has to address.
Next time on the Aaron Harber Show.
It is tremendously important throughout life that you develop your own reputation for integrity. You can be a lawyer, you can be sharp in the courtroom, you can be very capable, but if you do not have a reputation for integrity, you will not make your mark on the bar.
Please contact us. We want to hear from you. And thanks for watching.